So I was honored to be asked to open with the Devar. And I wanted to just acknowledge some of the struggle that a lot of us are experiencing these days. That these are times of high anxiety, especially when we're talking about climate change and climate policy. And I'd like to offer just an opportunity first for reflection and then for a little bit of spaciousness as we settle into our gathering this evening. And I'm guided here by a teaching that I got from an Israeli instructor at Hebrew College, way, way back when I was just starting off with my rabbinical studies. And she decided one day that we were all going to meet out at the Middlesex Fells. Anyone been to the Fells? Just quick show of hands. The Fells? Beautiful, beautiful up there. So we were wandering around the Fells, and at the end of that time, she said to us in Hebrew, "So why did I have us come here?" We had no idea because this is a Hebrew class, but what were we doing in the Fells? And she said, "It's because I haven't been here before. I'm Israeli. I'm not going to be here long. And it's important to walk in the land that you're living in. If you walk in the land, you can hear its voice. And remember, you're one with it. And when you walk in the land, your heart's a little more open." I've come back to that teaching again and again over the years. When I found myself struggling now, it's my inclination to head out into nature, to just get out of the house, get out of the office, go for a walk. A lot of us have done this. Like this is not unique to her or to me, but I feel that that teaching about the power that we found for grounding and for ease that we get in nature, we can derive actually from something from this week's Torah portion. But you never thought I was getting there. We're in Parashat Chaye Sarah. We're in the book of Genesis. It opens with the death of Sarah and it closes with Isaac's marriage to Rebecca, the next generation. And towards the end of the portion, Rebecca, who's going to be marrying Isaac, comes to Abraham's encampment and she's approaching it at dusk. And Isaac is out in the field. And he looks up and he sees Rebecca. She falls off her camel. That's a different story for another Dvar. And check Genesis, it's in there. What's Isaac doing out in the field? What's he up to? The Torah tells us that he went out lasuach in the field before night. And lasuach is one of these words that only appears once in Torah. So there's a lot of variation in the understanding of what it could mean. The sages generally interpret this to mean it's to meditate from sicha, like to have a conversation with God. Ibn Ezra, who's in the Middle Ages, says, no, it's from the Arabic, sacha'u. It's to travel about. He's ambling around. He's wandering about. We can take these two ideas together, that we can meditate in nature as we amble around, just like my Hebrew teacher showed our class, that we can let go of our tensions and our frustrations while we're out in the world. That can be really healing. And our investing in nature can be an antidote to anxiety, to tension, and even to fear. Now, Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, the great Hasidic teacher, exemplified this practice, and he wrote a prayer for us. You might have heard it before. And I'd like to offer it to our gathering, along with a very, very brief visualization exercise. So take a moment, sit comfortably, wherever you are. Recline easily. Let your body be at ease in this moment. Let muscles relax and unclench. And bring your concerns into the moment. Those worries, fears, inadequacies, all of this. Summon them forward. And as you do this, visualize a favorite place where you like to walk outside or where you enjoy sitting in nature. Hold that vision close. That easeful place of rest and calm. And the tension together. And here's Rabbi Nachman's words. Hold to that vision. Master of the universe, Grant me the ability to be alone. May it be my custom to go outdoors each day among the trees and the grass, among all the growing things. And there may I be alone and enter into prayer to talk with the one to whom I belong. May I express there everything in my heart. And may all the green things of the field, all grasses, trees, and plants awake at my coming to send the power of their life into the words of my prayer, so that my prayer and speech are made whole, the life and spirit of all growing thing. Ken Yihiratson. So may it be. And now gently, let yourself come back to the here and the now. Come back to this moment. Rabbi Nachman's words are a lot like Lasuach Basadeh, wandering in the spiritual wilderness. We can find some ease as we meditate, to draw ourselves into nature, seeking that connection to the natural world and finding inspiration as we draw close to our Creator and to creation. Friends, we live in anxious times, and let's pace ourselves so that we can accomplish the holy, sacred task of being Shomrei Adamah, being caretakers of this sacred earth. As our sages teach, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. It's not up to us to finish the task quickly. V'lo ata ben chorin lehivatel mimena, and we have the responsibility to keep engaging in it. So this evening and in times to come, let's continue to walk with sacred purpose together. Let's pace ourselves for the journey ahead. And may we be guided on this path with the light of our traditions and the care of our companions and friends here in this holy community.
Rabbi, thank you so much. Ken Yihiratson.
Amen v'amen.
And I think everybody's asking, so we should pace ourselves for how long?
As long as it takes.
So we will come back numerous times to the well, I think. It's going to take a while. And we are going to recognize the moment tonight in a number of ways. The moment being, the elephant in the room, the 2 weeks since the election. But we're going to do some other things too. And if you're coming in with a headache tonight, I have a guarantee for you that if you last another hour, you will leave with a different headache. So I hope you will appreciate what we're going to do here tonight. I will say for sure, it will not solve everything. And pace ourselves indeed. So I want to start out with that, just letting everyone know. Some who are very involved in climate organizing know this already. But right after the election, there was immediately a meeting, a Zoom, a nationwide Zoom of an organization called America is All In, saying America is still all in. And they started in 2017, and they formed immediately a coalition, a broad umbrella coalition of many states, many of the American states and cities, counting at that time over 2/3 or 3/4 of the American population, staying committed to climate action. That organization has revived. Before the election, it did, and Gina McCarthy, one of the leaders in it. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people in that call. And a couple of days later, here in Massachusetts, the Secretary of Energy, the Climate Secretary, Rebecca Tepper, and the Climate Chief, Melissa Hoffer, had a call, and 400 people showed up for that call, just Massachusetts climate-concerned leaders. And their guest of honor was also Gina McCarthy. And Gina McCarthy was former head of EPA and from right here in New England. So my point is that those people who care about climate are still all in, and those people who are on this call may not realize that, and I want to just make that very clear. This organization, Jewish Climate Action Network, similar. We're going to have a board meeting in 2 nights, and I would like to suggest we're an action-oriented organization. For everyone here, you grab an actual pen and an actual piece of paper in case you want to make notes. That's actually mandatory for the whole steering committee when we meet again. Some of the things I'll be recommending tonight, I hope will be taken up by the steering committee. So, Janet, would you take yourself off mute for just a second and say your name and your position within JCAN?
Janet Green, and I'm the outreach coordinator.
Thanks. And what I was thinking, Janet, would you mind putting into the chat your contact info, your email? Because I'm hoping people will feel inspired, interested. As I said, we're an action-oriented organization. I hope you will be inspired to take action. You don't have to say exactly which action at this moment, but if you'd like to be involved beyond just attending this webinar, please let Janet know. And many of you have been. And if you have been, you've been receiving our emails. So right up to the election, we were working very hard with Environmental Voter Project, trying to get, working to and succeeding to help Environmental Voter Project get millions of environmentalists to the polls. These are people, specifically environmentalists, who have not voted before. This was a many-year effort to get environmentalists who do not vote to vote. And tomorrow there'll be a program. And Deb Nancrane, you want to take yourself off mute for a minute, just say hello?
Good evening.
Thanks. So I want to mention that Deb led our EVP, Environmental Voter Project, phone banking for months, and many of you were involved in that, and many of you were involved with other types of electioneering, and Yasha Koak, which means way to go for all that hard work. Deb, are you able to put in the chat the notice of tomorrow's EVP meeting? It's midday, I think, right?
Yep, I already did, along with my email. So please contact me. But it's also probably going to be available on YouTube. So if you can't make it at 12, don't worry about it.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And while one other announcement before I forget, Rabbi Katie Allen is here. Rabbi, you want to take yourself off mute for a second? Just say hello.
Hello. Yes. Hi, everybody.
And Rabbi Katie Allen was the co-founder and president of JCAN for its first many years. I've only had this position the last 2 years, but I was honored to serve with you, Rabbi, for I think 9.5 or 10 years, serve alongside you. And so many of us still are inspired by you. And Rabbi Katie is going to be on a national call tomorrow with the Jewish Earth Alliance, the JEA. So it's a national effort that Mirla Goldsmith started years ago that works with members of Congress for them to understand that the Jewish community is, I'll use that phrase again, all in for climate work. So is somebody able to put in the chat about the link for the JEA meeting, which is tomorrow night? It may sound strange, but most of this presentation was set no matter how the election turned out. It's now been modified a bit, but it was going to be modified a bit a different way if the election turned out otherwise. But the core of it, surprisingly, is actually non-governmental. So facing the second half of this crucial decade, I ask, may ayin yavo ezri? From where will my help come? And I don't mean just me, all of us. And I think a key question here is who is afraid? And I don't need to have a show of hands right now, but fear is around. And I hope you'll see that I can connect some dots among some big ideas here and show that fear is actually a connecting thread in a way different than we expect. And also, as I say, these are big ideas. So many of these individual slide with a few words on it is a whole hour's worth of conversation. So appreciate everybody's patience as we roll along. And we can come back, and any one of these can be a whole program. So the caveats are, these are my views, not JCAN's. I could be wrong. I'm talking about the future. And apologize Apologies for any offense to any of you and my colleagues in particular. I just want to say that we all wake up every day with our own filters, and every day I wake up saying, what's the answer? We're in this mess, this climate mess. What's the answer? I think I know what it is, but then I scour my particular, well, they call them feeds, but my news sources. I look at this analyst or that opinion writer, and I'm telling you folks, this is Fred Davis speaking. From my perspective, almost every new commentator that I've seen for years misses the point. Misses the point. The best we've gotten so far is Sabrina Shankman, who came onto the Boston Globe 3 years ago, and all of a sudden, the Boston Globe was reporting climate as though climate matters, thanks to her. So she has done the best job I have seen ever, but still not quite there, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. So let's try to think for just a sec. I'm going to zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in. Okay, zooming out for a minute. Why do I say century? Anybody want to blurt out an answer? Why am I saying we need a time frame that lasts a century?
The Industrial Revolution.
Great, great, perfect, exactly. So looking backwards, we say generally that the climate problem started with the Industrial Revolution. So a lot of these charts start, 1900, they could start a little earlier, whatever. So temperature's been zooming up. So the dark part here is the dark line is what's now called historical. It's done. It's measured. And those strings on the right called spaghetti are also called scenarios. Scenarios. Okay, and they go off into, guess what? Another century, another century's worth. So 100 years before us, 100 years in front of us. So take a deep breath. This is a long haul.
Carbon in the atmosphere is really the reason, right?
Okay, somebody speaking? Go ahead.
Sorry, carbon that's already in the atmosphere is the reason we have to look forward that long, because it will take that long to get that carbon out of the atmosphere if we don't elevate it further.
Thank you, David. Good. All right, but for the moment, I'm just going to say that everyone who's concerned about climate should realize that this is permanent. Permanent. 100 years from now, we can change our minds, but that's a long time. How many institutions do you know that are 100 years old? There are quite a few, of course. But my point is that for most intents and purposes, everything we're doing, we should think of as permanent, which means JCAN organizes around synagogue green teams, local green teams. Those local green teams, which have, for all sorts of reasons, feel ad hoc, should go to each synagogue's board and say, we need to be a permanent committee, a standing committee. So this is Fred looking forward. That's one note. Every green team, whether it's synagogue or otherwise, actually should be a standing committee for the organization. And those scenarios on the right, the different possible outcomes, are also are actually composed of millions of individual decisions. Millions of individual decisions. And when I say individual, I mean individual. You, me, everyone we know. We like to think, it's sort of easy to think, it's government making the decisions. It's politicians. It's legislation. It isn't. And you'll see why in a minute. And one other view of those stringy spaghetti decisions is this more recent one. This is the latest. And this takes the gray up at the top with the original national DC's what were those contributions, designated contributions. Anyway, the blue one is the current, the recent last year's, and they're supposed to be revised every 5 years, every country in the world. So this is the future of the world, at least out for a few years. So at Yom Kippur, we were thinking about all our sins, right? And Fred's mind did wander a bit. I apologize, but our prayer book, recent prayer book, lists a whole lot of sins, and I thought, gosh, sometimes we run the risk of not keeping it simple. But sometimes we also, well, let's see. You'll see where this goes. I would say that it really is simple. I say there's millions of individual decisions. Again, for all intents and purposes, or I'm sorry, not all, but for most intents and purposes, in the directions that we can look, there are only 3 things that have to change for any household. If they can, solar on a roof. If they're driving a vehicle, it should be electric. If a building is heated, and every building in where we are is New England, the Northeast is heated, it should be heating with heat pumps. Those 3 things, why are those the only 3 measures? Because they take up so much of the carbon footprint, and for at the household level, you add up the other things that can be done, which should be done, that's fine. That's cooking and hot water. They don't add up to nearly as much as these 3. And even the caveats are simple. So these apply to anyone who lives in a single-family detached home, drives a car in cool, cold regions. Now, pause there. There are many people who don't live in single-family detached and don't drive a car. And what's the deal? Anybody want to blurt out? Why are they not being mentioned here?
As far as I know, in Massachusetts, if you rent, it's we can't really do anything about that. Not
Okay, that's an interesting point, that people who are renters don't have direct control over their heating systems or their roofs. That's sort of true, but more important, or I'm not saying that's not important. That is important. But generally, their carbon footprint, somebody who lives in a multifamily home, in other words, where there's multiple households within one building, their carbon footprint is as a result much, much lower. Their per person carbon footprint, their per household carbon footprint, much, much lower. They are part of the solution. It's a radical thing to say, but that's the case. The people who live in the single family detached homes, they're more part of the problem. Okay, and you'll see how this plays out in statistics in just a minute. So my point here is that the problem is much simpler than we usually think. So where will my help come from? It'll come from the roof. It'll come from, if you can put solar on it, it'll come from the driveway. If you have a vehicle, it'll come from the basement if that's where your heating system is. All right. So back to the headache for the last 2 weeks. Rabbi said, we're in it for the long haul. Yes, but here's another way of looking at the long haul. Here's the thought experiment. What if you woke up tomorrow? Okay, you woke up and there was a knock on the door. You went to answer the door, and there was somebody at the door. There was this guy. He had a funny name. His name is Honi. That funny name is from Jewish tradition. There's many things to say about Honi. I'm only going to say the one thing. This guy Honi is at your door and says to you the following words: I have slept for 70 years. What do you say?
Muzzle tov.
You like some carobs?
We need rain.
You might say, would you like to come in for a cup of coffee or maybe some breakfast even? All right. And then when I say, Manishma, what's happening? What if he wants to know what's going on?
Take a nap.
Go back to sleep?
I'd say there's so much good to tell them about first. And then
Oh.
so good.
Is that Scott's voice?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I want to give you a hug for that one. Beautiful, beautiful. All right. So I'm going to move towards, move to the next part of the thought experiment here and say, well, actually, we're about to have a president who's for a second term. The big lie will be taking office. And you'd say, what? And you'd have a lot of explaining to do, of course. Or somebody just said it, I think. You could say something else. You could say, We're in the middle of a record-setting drought. And you might say that because, Honey is interested in planting. All right, so that's an inside joke for people who know anything about Honey. All right, but here are these two possibilities, right? Can we keep them both in our heads? That's a real challenge. Do we say one or the other? Do we say one and the other? Both things are happening at once? And I would suggest that this dissonance, discordance that we're going through right now, it's hard, and it's going to be hard. I'm going to mention that in a minute. But there's a connection here that I want to make. First, I'm going to do something that could be very painful, so bear with, okay? It'll only last a couple of minutes, but it could be painful. I'm going to talk about the big lie. Disinformation. This is a big lie. I'm going to show you 4 of these. This is a big lie. These are each big lies. And my question is, what's the difference?
I would
Well,
say
I
there's
know
no
what the difference is. Number 3 led to an insurrection.
Good. That's excellent.
And number 4 affects the entire planet.
Very good. Very good.
It's focused domestically.
Very good. Any other? Please blurt out any other ideas.
Start with a particular individual with the first one, and the lie gets broader and broader, affecting more and more people, sort of in a reverse funnel. And the other thing that I'll say is that each one of these is in violation of the Jewish ethic against stealing the mind, misleading others purposefully.
I would say climate change is something, God have mercy on us. We can't do anything about the lie about Obama, where he was born. Election was stolen. Immigrants, we need to protect immigrants. But climate change is something we do have some power to affect.
Nice. Nice. By the way, one thing I'll note that is not the final answer that I'm going to get to is that these are incredibly distracting in that caring people will be bothered and want to do something about each of these. And it varies all over the place. What can one person do? What can organizations do? It varies, but one wants to do things. But my point is that to the extent caring people care and want to do things, it's distracting from other things that those people want to do. It takes up time and energy.
Number 2, I mean, that is the issue that the most leads to fascism.
Okay, so Janet, excellent point. And what if we took out that first word on the second line? Who else?
Oh,
Jews.
Oh, Jews.
This didn't come from nowhere.
Anybody but me is a menace.
Othering. Exactly. And if it isn't immigrants, it will be somebody else. It has been. It was Mexicans for a minute. Not a minute, for a long time.
the vaccine is a menace is a debate I'm having with a friend from our favorite island.
Right, got it.
Cool. It's all distorting of reality and undermining a steady diet of reality.
Nice.
The only one that doesn't have to be political is the last one. I mean, the first 3 are all politically tied or ways of affecting politics. The last one is too, but the last one, there's no reason why both sides can't come together and look at the science.
Yes. Okay, good. So thank you for doing that, David. And, so much is going on, folks, and I'm going to say that so much will be going on. In other words, we are just at the beginning of organizers organizing. But I do want to mention the podcast, great podcast, series, but the particular one, but A Matter of Degrees, you can get that podcast anywhere. And the latest episode was What the Election Means for Climate Policy. I recommend it highly. 58 minutes last week. And there was an interview with the guy who wrote the IRA, mostly wrote the IRA legislation. And the biggest question there was what's going to happen, what could happen, should happen as the IRA legislation gets attacked. Okay, so that's a digression a bit, but it's it's so right on point too. Okay, so I'm going to move ahead. Thank you for all those thoughts. And I was thinking, gee, this could take up oh wait, no, each of these could take, no, wait, this is each, no, you know what this is? This is an entire college curriculum to discuss this Michigas. Okay.
I just want to say something.
Yep. There is an answer here that I'm about to get to. Diana, is that you?
That's Diana.
Go for it.
All these distractions are meant to shut people down, to shut down our hope, and to shut down our agency.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you. And George, I see you here. You said exactly the same thing last week, so thank you.
Say something else.
Go for it.
It's been my feeling for the last 6 or 7 months that much of the politics that we're seeing, the focus on electoral politics in particular, is an avoidance of dealing with climate. That we're churning all of this anxiety around who wins, who loses, in order not to face what we have to face.
George gets the gold star here. Watch what happens. Thank you, George. And by the way, you're all right. It's all a great discussion. You're all right. But in that college curriculum that unfortunately not enough of the world has taken, all about fascism and how fascism works. And it works. How effective it is. Anyway, it would deal with all the things that you've all said. It's wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. But here's the point I'm getting to. Right? So you ask yourself, who benefits from Obama was born in Kenya, from that big lie? Right? And we can all imagine the answers. Okay. Who benefits from immigrants are a menace? Etc. And who benefits from climate change as a hoax? Oh my goodness, I looked it up. Does anybody know how large the petroleum products industry is? $6 trillion and still growing? And George, I agree with you. I think that is the motivation. The motivation. Now, as I said, I could be wrong. And as I said, I do not speak for JCAN. So I may be just out there. But I want to put this out there. That's what I want to do. And thank you so much, all 50 of you who are still on this call. So disinformation is purposeful. And in this case, a multi-trillion-dollar industry is afraid. If they weren't afraid, why would they bother? Why would they bother? Because the direction that much of the world was going in, Europe certainly, the US strugglingly was moving ahead, is threatening that industry. Now, I might have thought this last year, but now I'm convinced. And who are they afraid of? It's the likes of us. We're nudging this thing along. There are lots of powerful people who make things happen, sure, but it's a vast worldwide movement for climate change. So, whatever path we're pursuing, is leading towards in the direction of disempowering petroleum. And now we know that they need to be disempowered. There's now no doubt about it. So, as I said, headaches, right? Is this really happening? Oy vey, we're asking ourselves every day. But the other question is this really what's happening? And then as Rabbi, you were able to get us to notice for a moment at least, we should ask, is this really the most important thing happening? And a number of you have already said that. Climate change is a bigger threat than all the above. But who's the threat and who's worried, right? We're threatening them. And I'm sorry to use us and them, but in this case, it applies. And as we said, it distracts much of us from, much of the US from decarbonization, and that distraction is intended to be massive in the next 4 years. I would like to say that before 2 weeks ago, I was also talking about petrostates sowing chaos in the world. Petrostates, specifically Russia and Iran. They are sowing massive chaos, massive terrorism, massive destruction. What's a petrostate? A nation state that gets most of its income from petroleum products. And their efforts have distracted much of the world from decarbonization. And I say that's not a coincidence. Again. So, how do we pursue a path to disempower petroleum? Well, surprisingly, even though 2 weeks ago we had terrible news in the American election, what I'm about to say, the path, I also already mentioned it before, is open to it, and it does not involve government. So people might say there's a record-setting drought. Isn't anybody doing anything about it? You know, it's been a while since people asked such a simple question. As I said, it's possible to ask such a question. And Sabrina Shankman does do that, and so do other good reporters these days. And here's an answer. Yes, yes. And guess who's doing something about it? And apologies for those of you on the call who are not from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but this news just in last week. This is per person carbon footprint by state. These are the lowest per person carbon footprint states. Any questions about this? Please just blurt it out. I will stay on this slide for a minute. But this shows that we have, in this state, been doing something, actually lots of things, right. It's hard to get that carbon footprint down. We're a cold, relatively cold state, colder than New Jersey, but our carbon footprint is significantly lower. It's taken effort. It's taken over 10 years, 15 years. Just thinking about the time span. Anyway, and look who's lower.
DC.
Why?
Mostly, I guess, a lot of people living in dense housing.
Exactly. They are part of the solution.
Or
exactly.
living in the exurbs in Maryland and Virginia and commuting in by rail, which is also efficient.
Right. Well, they have to, for this statistic, they have to be in District of Columbia, right? So generally, people in cities, public transportation, low carbon footprint for transportation, low carbon footprint for buildings. If you live in a city,
average carbon footprint is about 4.
Say again.
The global average carbon footprint is about 4 metric tons.
Which gets back to who is the problem. Right? Massachusetts is still a problem, right? We're still way above average, and we're the best state in the country.
But Canada is even worse.
Good to know. Okay. So, and by the way, I always say New York at one point was the lowest on this ranking a couple of years ago, and I used to say, well, how could New York be lowest carbon footprint per in the country? Same answer, because New York City. In other words, so much of New York State and the people who live in New York State, so many of them live in New York City that it drives the average carbon footprint down so low. So Yasha Koach, way to go for city dwellers. Yay. Okay, so we're doing something right is what it means. But it also means huge responsibility. Huge responsibility. We have a governor who supports this stuff. We have a climate chief. We have excellent institutions. We have excellent nonprofits. We need to do much better. More, more, more. And it's not just 49 other states, it's the whole world. If we can show that it can be done, if we can show that it can be done. All right, so that's where we are right now, right now, right now. What's happening next? Well, we happen to have the greatest incentives that have ever been around for these decarbonization measures. And we have a brand new climate bill. Yasha Koach to activists, and David and Lynn and John and Mark, and I can't see everybody on the call. Yasha Koach for all that you've done. That's our Legs and Regs group. Okay, and by the way, I'm told that there's a lot of commentary in the chat. So I'm looking forward to that, but I can't see it at this point. So if it's intended for me, please hold. But I would love to get into, is there anything that's been discussed so far that needs to be discussed out loud?
I am monitoring, and Jeanette Rule has a question that
Go for
all
it.
three things that you mentioned, the PV, the EV, and the heat pumps have incentives from Mass Save. Are those incentives in jeopardy now?
Good, good. So if anybody listens to that podcast I mentioned a minute ago, they talk about what's going to happen in the next 70 days is a mad scramble. Already the federal government has been pushing funds out the door, and they are going to continue to scramble double time. And some of those funds have not been allocated to the states yet. Some of them are major. Some of them, I think, and if Mark on this call, can address the question whether they're headed for Mass Save. I think they are. And on the Massachusetts call with last week, that was acknowledged on the receiving end that the state will be making sure that those funds come in time. All right, so that's part of the answer. The other possible answer is who knows just how much havoc can be caused starting in January. Again, the A Matter of Degrees podcast deals with that question. None of it can be firmly answered at this point. Okay, anything else there? Thea, thank you for mentioning.
Lynn is asking, are you also thinking of a synagogue roof, unused space, traveling to services and things when you're talking about carbon footprint?
Do that again, synagogue.
Synagogues, the roof, unused space, traveling to services.
So I think, yeah, right. So any facility, including a synagogue, those are all somewhat different questions, but certainly synagogues reducing their carbon footprint. I will be talking about that in a minute. It's something we've been talking about a lot over the years. Yeah.
Okay, and you talk about those three things, the heat pump, the solar panels, and the EV. People are pointing out that other things matter, such as food choices and air travel, and animal agriculture worldwide has more climate input than all impact than all transportation combined. So there's discussion about these things. And also,
right. So we've had these webinars before, and we could have them again if people want. The quick answer, which people do not like this answer, I'm sorry in advance, 5%. The average American diet is responsible for 13% of the average American footprint. The average American carbon footprint, 13% of that is attributable to diet, all the aspects of food. Okay, so 13% is the starting point. And 13% of the starting point can't go to the zero. I guess if you grew all your own food and never fertilized it and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, but in general, you can't go to zero. If you go all vegan, it's approximately 5% improvement. You can take that 13% down to 8%. That's the quick answer, and people deserve a longer answer, but that's the quick answer. The reason that doesn't jive with the other thing that you said, that worldwide food uh, uh, takes up so much of the carbon footprint, it gets back to what George said. Worldwide, the average carbon footprint is so small compared to the average American carbon footprint. Therefore, worldwide, food is a big percentage. But in America, our denominator, our total per person carbon footprint is so high that food is only 13%, and we can only make 5%. That's why the three things I'm talking about take up 70% or so, 65 or 70%.
Okay, and
Okay.
it's pointed out that Mass Save is wholly funded by Massachusetts ratepayers, not by
Yes.
federal funds. So,
Yes, and who said that, by the way?
Haskell
Right, right.
said that, and also Juliet Rooney.
Thank you, and that's right, that's right. So, and we all are paying into Mass Save at all times. I thought there was a chunk coming through, and if there isn't, that's fine. Then it's other chunks are headed to the state, not having to do with Mass Save. Thank you.
And
Okay.
Haskell also points out that the solar incentive program is also state funded.
Great, thank you, Haskell. I want to mention that I mentioned just a minute ago our legislation and regulation, Legs and Regs. Our advocacy group meets every week, and it is by far the most active and effective part of our organization. It's fantastic. We have a rabbinic council, clergy council that Rabbi Josh Brendel exemplifies and in our program tonight, and is now leading. And Rabbi Katie is very involved with that and much appreciated. And we have had, in name at least, this third council called Tech and Decarbonizing, it was called. And now I recommend as of tonight, I'm recommending that we switch that up, and we can keep the Tech Council, which is the professionals in the energy field, which is great. But we have a fourth council that's all about community, and you'll see why. All about community. So, getting back to Deb, just mentioning Deb one more time. Deb and Janet and Thea, you were always all about community. You were always reaching out to our entire network and getting people to do things, and it's been fantastic to watch. And in general, JCAN has been a beautiful thing to be involved with. Rabbi Katie had a vision. A batch of us said, "Really?" And then we said, "How do we do that?" And then we figured out some things, and it's been 11 years now. And one of the things that was lovely was our monthly meetings, monthly in-person meetings. How many people have attended any kind of a monthly in-person meeting, hopefully beyond going to, your synagogue services? Anyway, it was a lovely thing, and it rotated amongst synagogues throughout the Boston metropolitan area. And in hindsight, wow, was it something? It's how we built a network. And just think of it, every meeting was open to anyone. So there's a core group, a sort of governing body, and then the local folks of that synagogue would show up and say, "What's this all about?" And then a few other people from other synagogues. In general, we would typically have maybe a dozen different synagogues represented, and it rotated. And people who worked in their own synagogue trying to get people to pay attention to climate had a way to go out of their silos. And wow, was it empowering for each of those people. And hopefully it still is. Then COVID happened, and then October 7th happened, which was a major shock to the Jewish community. And I know not everybody here is on the call is Jewish. And now another whopper of a shock. Okay. So Fred's suggestion is going forward, we go back to, maybe not January and February, but most of the year we go back to our rotating, schlepping meetings. We meet in person. That's my strong suggestion. And look at this third line, and I would like the clergy council to come back with their considered opinion about this. But I think that in person, seeing each other, touches, it's an organizing term. It doesn't mean actually. Okay, but you touch people, especially amidst trauma, and there may be more of it and angst. That's my recommendation. All right. Also, as I alluded to, I think we'll all forget this this particular podcast in a minute. That's why I wanted you to write it down. Why will you forget it in a minute? Because there's so many things about to hit anybody who's concerned, anybody who's about any of this, that we will have all sorts of ideas, and including what should resistance look like? Oy vey. I already hear my colleagues talking this way. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying, oy, this is awful. And there will be huge opportunities for organizing around government responsibility and corporate culpability, venality, avarice. But, I'm suggesting we swivel in our chairs and look in a different direction. In addition, not hide, not forget any of the above, but in addition, we turn around and remember that the consumption is almost entirely in individuals' hands. We should never blame the user, but in our consumer economy in this country, it is only the consumer who has the opportunity to diminish or eliminate their own carbon footprint. The government, I haven't seen any proposals yet for the government to say, thou must. It's all been carrots. Carrots. And those carrots are plentiful right now, by the way, back to the incentives. And the households are the largest share of carbon in both buildings and transportation. And what do you know? For an organization like ours, they're who we talk to. And it happens to be, many of the people who show up for JCAN, it is us. And you might say, yeah, but really, what more can we do? And on the level of incentives, there's always more that can be done, but I'm not asking for more incentives at this point. People might say, aren't we doing everything we can do for households? Again, the mechanisms are almost all in place at the moment. Now, what's left is the individual, the millions of decisions. Decarbonization can be accelerated dramatically. How did we deploy those three measures into larger and larger portions of households and accelerate it? Well, it turns out this is not the first time that a major transition has to happen, or is happening, I should say. I'm calling it has to, but it's not the first time that major transitions have happened. It's called adoption curves. Adoption of any technology happens in stages, and there are lessons common to every transition. This one is the same. There's a pattern, and we need to keep it in mind, and it helps. There are innovators, there are early adopters, and on the far end, there are laggards. If the population ultimately all gets cell phones, some people got them early, some people got them late. That's an adoption curve. If America, at one point in 1930, let's say, nobody had a TV, and in the year 2000, every household had 2 TVs on average. That's an adoption curve. All right. The x-axis is time. Over time, more and more people adopt the technology. And what tends to happen, it goes in these, sort of arbitrary groupings, but they're not totally arbitrary. Innovators are a peculiar lot of people. Peculiar meaning they're unlike the rest of us. They go ahead with something for different motivations. And I'll get into that in a second. Where we are in this is somewhere in here, and we need to keep moving up that hill. And we are moving up that hill. We are moving up that hill. But it's important to know first two things about adoption curves. There's early, middle, and late. Okay. And there's differences in those time periods. And there's also two different categories of motivation. There's the top down and the side to side. The top down is what the early adopters are motivated by. Top down means some authority, some expert, salespeople, literature, whatever, but a source from which the top-down learners get motivated. Okay, everybody with me so far? Any questions? That's top-down. And by the way, both these tendencies happen all through the adoption curve, but the beginning, it's all top-down by definition. And at the end, it's almost all side by side, side to side. And that means you get your motivation from peers, from other people that you know and typically trust, your friends, your family, your neighbors, not from an expert. Now, I'm not saying it's all one or the other, but what happens is after those first phase, after you're past the innovators and you're into the early adopters, more and more and more of that change all the way through is from peers. And that even that peer, we usually use the word peer pressure, and I don't mean to use that, but peer influence, peer motivation, even that shifts over time. It shifts dramatically. And we can make use of this knowledge. We should. Everything we do should be making use of this knowledge. The climate movement to date has been fantastic with the top down. We've had a huge blossoming of educational presentations, classes, programs, talks, webinars, articles, books, movies, podcasts, etc., etc. It's all good, and it shouldn't stop. And it keeps, it's repetitive. It's good. People get educated, and it's good. So many of us like that kind of education. But and as I said, it's predominant in the early stages. But today, in most contexts in Massachusetts, we're significantly beyond a true early adoption phase. How do we know? Anybody want to blur it out? Anybody still listening? How do we know we're beyond, in any community, we're beyond a true early adoption phase? What's a sure telltale sign?
The number of participants.
Thank you. So, anybody can think, let's say, their own synagogue or their own town of at least 3 people who drive an electric vehicle in that community, right? I think so. So rooftop solar, heat pump heating, electric vehicles can be found in virtually every community. And I say virtually just because I haven't researched all 351 cities and towns to the nth degree. Pretty confident about this at this point. And that means we're in this phase where peer influence, peer motivation works. And it will work more and more as time goes on. So, peer-to-peer, it works because you trust the neighbor. Their house is like yours. Their commute is like yours. And we've been way, way too stuck in that first phase. So, many of you know, JCAN has had this program. This is a peer-to-peer program. We call it decarbonizers. Maria has put this program on in her own synagogue, got people together, and it's a very simple formula. And I still feel strongly it's the way to go, both in synagogues and in anything that can be called a community, like a town or a municipality or your neighborhood. And this is the simple formula. There's 3 decarbonizers. They're all non-experts. They're just people. One who's gone EV, who drives an electric vehicle, one who has solar on their roof, one who heats with a heat pump. 3 different people, 3 different households. Those are your speakers. You work with them over you work with them, and so then they become your speakers. They speak for 6 minutes, 8 minutes each, and they say, this is my electric vehicle, and it's been great because I can charge here and I never have to go to the gas station. These are the next person says, these are my solar panels, etc. The heat pump, it's so comfortable. And anyway, whatever they say for 6 to 8 minutes, good, bad, and indifferent, it's all good. Their peers find out it's no big deal, right? It's no big deal when they see that their neighbor has done this and they're talking about it so easily. Other people say, "Oh my goodness, we can do that," and that's the beauty. It's super easy to organize. It's fun to do, super effective, and nothing governmental is involved. But this is the path to accelerating decarbonization. All the tools are in place. All we have to do is organize peer-to-peer motivating. We haven't seen enough uptake in this. That's why I'm suggesting we have an entire new council devoted to community. We can do this. So thanks for your patience, folks. I'm going to rocket through a few more slides of other things on the path to disempower petroleum. I already said we should center. These are now, if for JCAN steering committee still paying attention, get your pens out. Here's the list. One at a time. We should center peer-to-peer organizing, center it in our work. Similarly, we should keep all the organizing retail and local. We should rotate our monthly meetings. We should listen and learn from each green team. It's empowering to them. It's good organizing. Now I'm going forward in the next few years. I see there are so many climate groups that have grown up and they're great. I love them all. I do. And but it's amazing to me, the sort of ecosystem of climate organizations. Mass Power Forward, a great umbrella organization on advocacy, excuse me. They count over 200 organizations as part of that's in Massachusetts. 200. Oh my goodness. There's got to be, and by the way, I love the collaboration and cooperation. Whenever I've reached out, it's been fantastic. I think there's great opportunity for more. In the Jewish community, similarly, there's been, since JCAN started 11 years ago, other communities, Jewish communities in the New York area, the Washington, D.C. area, got started. They've started their own Jewish climate action networks. That's why we're now called MA. Even though we reach out to, as you know, I think there's someone here from, call out if you don't mind, if you're from out of state. Can't see the list, so I don't see everybody. Anybody here from out of state?
I'm from New York.
Yay, Kim, thank you.
And Myron Katz from New Orleans.
Hey, Myron.
Bob Kibrick from California.
Bob, it's great to have you here. Thank you, everybody. All right. And Higher Ground Initiative, it seems Scott is not here, but Scott runs the coalition of mostly Florida synagogues, which is great work. And nationally, Dayenu and nationally, Adama, all doing different things in the climate space. But I say going forward, we should continue to look for opportunities to consolidate, at least collaborate for strength. All right. Here's something that goes beyond. I suggest that what I'm talking about, particularly the community organizing, doesn't need to be done by nonprofit organizations. It should be done by the state, hopefully even better. But they can do it in cooperation with nonprofits. But why shouldn't the state do this? Green teams, local decarbonizer programs, it's entirely concordant. Is that the right word? It's entirely what the state goals would want. It's immediately scalable, immediately replicable. And I keep saying it's the only path to truly accelerate implementation. And also on the state level, the state should be massively public messaging. So in Europe, you see this all the time. You see posters at the bus station, at the train station, all about how the EU, without spelling it out in words, just pictures, because it works in all the different languages, these pictures, but how the EU is engaged in decarbonization. There's workers putting up solar, there's people pointing to heat pumps, there's young people, there's workers. It's fantastic. And it's pervasive, and it's not an issue. It's not a political issue. Anyway, in Massachusetts, it isn't a political issue, and why not have it in public messaging all the time, all over the place? Rate buildings already. Again, in Europe, public buildings are rated. You can go into a restaurant, and before you look at a menu, you can look at the rating on the wall, their energy footprint, their energy usage and their carbon footprint. You could walk out. Public buildings that are open to the public have to post their carbon footprint. Sounds radical here. Actually, I shouldn't say that. In New York, it's already started in larger buildings. Yashakoak, New York. And Berto, in Massachusetts, large buildings have started. I say, move that along. Move it to all size buildings. And then in the Jewish communities, each movement, Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, could make it a requirement of membership and a part of every synagogue annual report. The committee, there should be a standing committee, remember, should give its report, and it should always be reducing its carbon footprint, and not just by a little. Every organization should now have a net zero plan. Eric, you want to say hello? Those folks have been involved with training in how to put together a net zero plan. It isn't difficult. We used to say you can take 6 or 8 years. Now we say take 3. Take 3. Could take a year just to get everybody on the same, literally on the same page, a whole board of directors on the same page. But then after that year, it can be done in the next 2 years. Most every measure that's needed in a retrofit can be done in a couple of years. If the building is so far from having a low enough carbon footprint, that means they may have an end of life to that building at some point anyway. So that's another way to plan for low carbon footprint is the next building. Okay, a lot to be said there. I don't want to dwell on any one of these for too long. And similarly, we need to refresh local green teams. JCAN has been around for 11 years. It's clear to those of us who are paying attention at the organizing level that the people who were active in the green team in this synagogue 6 years ago, they may have moved along. They may be involved in other committees. They may not be active in that synagogue at all anymore. Who knows? Anyway, time moves along, and any nonprofit organization needs attention over time. All right, this gets to real core moral issues. We're so far from being real about the cost of carbon. I still see it today. I was in a 2.5-hour meeting. People were talking about this project, that project, that project. Does not pencil out. In other words, they'd like to decarbonize, but it's not, quote, cost effective. And the right answer for any of us with any morality is, well, not having a world is even more expensive. And the problem why these things don't pencil out is because everything that carbon causes, the floods, the fires, the dislocation, etc., everything is externalized and diffused. It still costs, but nobody pays for it directly. That's externalized costs. So we should at least have every project include societal cost of carbon in its evaluation. It's immoral to do otherwise. Hey, this one, Haskell, thanks for being here. You know what I'm talking about. I'm starting from the right. Indoor cannabis production is unbelievably carbon energy intensive, and it's a whole discussion, but cannabis can be grown outdoors where there's no carbon footprint. Okay, all of us right now, we're using servers. We watch TV, we're using servers. Cryptocurrency, oh my goodness, who dreamt up this monstrosity? And it's about to get an office, it seems, in the White House, ay vey, and AI. And the tech companies are saying out loud, without any shame, we need to build more nuclear plants, and we're taking over coal plants because we need it, and consumers are demanding it. Oy. So anyway, so each of these takes an hour to discuss at least, but we should scream out about avarice. And I apologize for my whole industry, back to that externalized problem, externality problem, I should say. Cost effectiveness has been a model for all these years. It's worked wonders. We've made huge inroads. Steve Nadell years ago said, if not for the energy efficiency efforts over the last 50 years, we'd be 50% further away from achieving carbon goals. So thank goodness, but it shouldn't be seen as everything. Eliminating carbon is a societal necessity. Fixing potholes, recreational spaces, smoke alarms. These things are needed even if they don't, quote, pencil out. Even if you don't make money by doing them, they still must be done. We need to push, push, push. All right. And last but not least, I want to just say constructively, that we have spent, I'm talking from many organizations and many efforts. We've talked a lot about new construction, which is great. We've made fantastic inroads, revisions to the stretch code, implementing the specialized code. We've talked about embodied carbon. We need to keep pushing on those things, moving them ahead. There's a new code cycle starting now. It's all good, but it's exhausting. And if we need to do day-to-day decarbonizing in a retrofit, every organization needs to carve out time to do a lot of that. Another constructive criticism is similarly, we spend so much time on cost considerations. They're all important, they're all good, but again, it takes up a lot of oxygen. I love Mass Energize, who, by the way, has a meeting scheduled tonight. I apologize. I hope some of you watching the tape, leaders at Mass Energize, I apologize for this sounding critical, but they've heard me say this, that their tool is so awesome, it should be whole community, an opt-out model, so that in the case of a synagogue, the whole synagogue signs on. The board of directors says, let's do that, and populates, shares with Mass Energize the names of the members, and the members can then go onto the website and say, oh, here it is. I'm decarbonizing, so I check. And by the way, you got to go to Mass Energize and learn about it to know what I'm talking about. But then once you get into the Mass Energize portal, you just check the boxes and say you've done your electric vehicle, you've got the solar on the roof, you haven't yet put in the heat pump, whatever. You check the boxes. Now, it has been stated before, whatever you do, climate leader, never say just check the boxes. Well, Fred is saying that just check the boxes is fine. How do we know this? Because learning everything there is to know about carbon is a tremendous burden. The climate crisis is terrible. I don't wish even learning a lot about it on anybody. I do wish that they just check the boxes. If they want to feel a lot better, they can. Check the boxes and move on. It's okay. All right. Again, this is Fred's idea. I look forward to criticism. And we're just about done, folks. To all, I say, stay engaged. Whatever it is that keeps you engaged. It might be government advocacy. It might be resistance. It might be protests. But whatever it is, don't take up all the oxygen, because organizing communities is something that is absolutely needed. And any of us can do it. More of us need to do it. I want you to feel empowered to do it. The opportunity to meaningfully accelerate decarbonization in these next few years, it's staring us in the face. The opportunity is straight ahead. I have seen this. I've been looking for this. I don't see other opportunities. This is it. It's what the next generation would want. It's what the big liars definitely don't want. But we can do it. Nobody is stopping us. Nobody. So let's go for it. And I say again, if you can scroll back to if you put your email, and I'll stop talking in a second and we can everybody can speak. If you're interested in any engagement with JCAN, please let Janet know. I'm taking down the screen share. Thank you so much for your patience. And please, let's start with any urgent reporting from the chat.
Well, Scott mentioned that the conservative Jewish movement, Masorti, started a national movement called Masorti Environmental Sustainability Initiative. So this is good to know.
All right. Any comments or questions, concerns about my presentation? I covered a lot. Hopefully folks were listening. It was a lot. And again, you may have a headache now, but is it different than the headache you started with? That's my question.
Climate chaos is coming for us all, and it would be good for people in the community to prepare for the next weather emergency consciously in ways that are adaptation or mitigation. And as Fred knows, for 2 decades or more, I've been saying solar is civil defense. And the flashlight, radio, extra set of batteries that we're supposed to have on hand in case of emergency can easily be supplied by a couple of square inches of PV panel. And Nigeria is selling a light and cell phone chargers for $5 a pop, retail. So these things are available. This is also entry-level electricity for the 700 million people at the bottom of the barrel. And it would be good, possibly as a tactic, to have temples and synagogues think about emergency preparedness within a climate context and contact your emergency preparedness people locally and statewide to keep this ball rolling, to make something happen. Because we don't know when the next hurricane is coming. We don't know if there's going to be a blizzard this year or a polar vortex or anything like that. And we can prepare ourselves in ways that do adapt and mitigate for climate.
Thanks, George.
George, you were mentioning things in the beginning. Can you put some references or links or names of stuff that you were referring to? I didn't understand what you were talking about. Where to get radios or chargers or PCV pipe. I don't know. I'm sure what you were saying.
If you just search online shopping for a solar light and battery chargers, you'll find stuff that is very right off the shelf and very affordable.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to give a comment to my comment about food, as I'm sure you figured it out, that although our footprint as a nation is largely made up of things that don't include food, as individuals, it's one of the easiest things we can do, and it still makes a huge difference worldwide, because I believe we're the biggest food meat consumers in the world, and we are rapidly destroying the rainforests in service of that. So I think it's still a very large problem that needs to be addressed and can easily be addressed at no cost. And so that's the low-hanging fruit. So I would encourage you to include that in your deliberations, in your considerations, I should say.
Anybody else want to speak up?
Good. Hi, it was too much to type into the chat, so I'll say it verbally. You kind of sparked a light when you talked about collaboration, because it brought me back to, Mary will remember this, the beginning of my climate activism, when I was introduced to something called land care. And that's more agricultural based, but I was impressed by that and was trying to figure out how to translate it into a climate approach. And it was really sort of networks of networks, learning networks to share experience and to spread this, the innovation curve, as you said. The challenge, the reason I sort of gave it up is it takes a lot of energy. And I presented it to the Massachusetts, I tried to present it to the Massachusetts governor. I don't know that he ever read what I handed him, but handed it to his Secretary of Energy and Environment. And he finally said, "What's this crazy idea of yours, David?" on the third try. And he impressed on me on, this grassroots concept. I didn't know who should own it. It seemed to not be ideal for it to be government. It needed to be multifaceted. He said, well, policy is the answer. That's what my job is, and that's the quicker answer. And I think that's been true. I gave him credit that is often true, but because people don't always want to change. It is a collective change, a collective embracing of policy. Grassroots will, from the ground up, educate people and get people engaged, as we've been doing, as the climate networks, JCAN, MCAN, and others have done. But then you need to be met top down with policy, or we help to advocate for policy. In the situation we're in now, where our state government is, and I look forward to hearing more about the bill, state government is taking a leadership role or is doing the right thing. But nationally, it's not as obvious what's going to happen. And these collaborations are a way to build the grassroots and keep some movement going in the right direction. A lot of people don't want to change. When you talk about diet, I think of my meat-eating family and how I just cannot shake them from meat. When we talk about taking shorter showers or turning down the temperature, I think of my family not wanting to give up that convenience, and on and on and on. And so I sort of concluded that technology is the solution if we don't have to think about it. And Fred, you know this very well. Our lights, our LED lights, we've reduced our impact a lot. We have sensors for our houses to turn off lights or in buildings, and of course heat pumps, more efficient technologies. So we're moving in that direction, but it also takes will. Buying an electric car or buying a heat pump takes will and money. So there are different avenues, but sharing experience, I agree, you're right, is the best way to get more people on board. Building those collaborations takes energy, takes time, and is challenging, but it is, I believe, very effective. Sorry.
Right. So some of us are geeky, and I'm not necessarily saying everybody has to do this, but what you're talking about, David, is measurable, right? So if you make changes in your household, what matters is the amount of carbon that you're contributing. Your carbon footprint should be coming down, and it's measurable.
Right.
And so I love that when carbon gets measured, it's not what everybody has to do, but it's important, it's doable, and it's one way to go. Okay.
I just want to take a moment to express my appreciation to you, Fred, for your last, you said your last major talk as president, for, picking up that responsibility and for all that you've done for JCAN over the years. So you've made a big difference and really provided a lot of important leadership. And I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude for that.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi. And see everybody else chiming in. Thank you so much. That's so nice of you. Thank you.
Fred, thank you so much for keeping us going for this last decade.
Thank you, David. You too. I am sidestepping the question about what's in the climate bill, because the answer is, I'll give you the presidential answer, a lot. There's a lot in there. It took a lot to get a lot in there. It took 2 years. And then after 2 years, it was done and dead. This is 3 months ago. And it got, the effort was mighty. Again, that 200 organizations, part of Mass Power Forward, that umbrella, all that organizing from all those organizations, including us making the calls over the last 2 years, that all that combined effort. It's crazy that democracy needs that, but that when it works, it can work. So I am avoiding that because it's a lot. It's not the topic for tonight. We could have a whole meeting about it. We can read about it in the newspaper. So if anybody really wants to stay on to discuss this, that's fine.
Unfortunately,
There
Mark and Harvey, who really know, are not on the call at this point. But they gave us a report this morning. We got most of what we were pushing for on the climate bill. So let's see what happens when it is signed.
Good. And I appreciate the reporting, both from this morning and both from this evening. And the rest of us should appreciate, look at all this effort from, I mean, everybody here talking about this is all volunteer. It's incredible. So we are connected and effective. And I hope we'll take it up on Wednesday. We'll put it on the agenda for any notes anybody took from any of my suggestions tonight, which things we might pursue going forward. But I really hope that this further community organizing is going to be taken seriously. I also want to say, give a shout out to my colleagues at the Massachusetts Climate Action Network who have come out here late on a Monday night. I very much appreciate you being here, and I look forward to talking about any of these projects together. I am also on the MCAN board. Any other comments about that shouldn't be held? I don't want to. And I'm glad to stay on for another 10 minutes if anybody would like to. But otherwise, let's say Yasha Koak for you all coming, and all the best to all of us. Keep our eyes open. Things will be, there's nothing constant but change, and it'll keep happening. Thanks for showing up, folks. I really appreciate it.